Hey, this is James, fitness and sports instructor here at CFB Kingston. So for today's video session here, we're going to be going over some soccer skill development. So with that, we're just going to go over a little bit of a talk about some soccer skill development and then go through some demonstrations of some drills that you can use for that goal. So just a quick reminder before we get started, if while you're performing any of these drills you think you might pick up an injury or anything of that sort, just make sure you get it checked out with a healthcare professional. And if you are a CAF member, just make sure to fill out ACF 98. So just another quick little before we get into it. I myself have some experience playing soccer, but I never really possessed the ability or skill to play at a significantly high level. But all the information that you're going to get in this video and all the drills that we're going to perform, we're part of a collaborative effort with a former very talented varsity level soccer athlete. So all that information is from a little combined effort between myself and that other individual. So before we get into the drills and going through some of those very specific elements, we're going to do more of a general talk about why the skill development is important and how it kind of applies in a game situation. So one thing to note is, as you can see here, we're talking about solo soccer skill development today with this video. With the current pandemic scenario that we are in right now and all the restrictions that are in play, it's going to be difficult to be able to do team activities a lot of times, or being able to get people together to a certain extent. So we're going to focus primarily on solo stuff that you can do on your own. Mainly all you're going to need for that obviously is a ball and some cones. Hopefully you have a wall space, and then sometimes maybe some targets might help as well. So we'll kind of go through some ideas for all of those things, but this is all going to be really focused more on the solo aspect, and then hopefully you'll be able to apply this in a team scenario later on. So for soccer skill development, a big thing here on the whiteboard that you can see in the red with the exclamation mark is 90 seconds. So what does 90 seconds mean? So what we're talking about here, 90 seconds is, based on a lot of studies, roughly the average amount of time in a full 90-minute plus extra time match that a player will have the ball in possession at their feet. So you can see that that is a very small amount of time in relation to that full time of the game. So there's a couple kind of key takeaways from that. So when that breaks down, a lot of times individual possession is going to range somewhere between like 3, or it could even be less, up to maybe about 10 seconds. There might be some opportunities where it might go past that, but that's usually where you're going to be sitting in terms of actual possession at the ball at your feet. All the other time within a match, the ball is generally going to be off the feet of the players, and it's going to be in play, in movement. And the other thing to consider is just because of the fact that soccer is played with a lot more players than some other sports. When you look at hockey or basketball, which is 5-a-side, soccer is 11-a-side, 10 outfield players. So the ball is going to be shared a lot more. And also the bigger surface area creates more time for the ball to travel. So again, 90 seconds is kind of that average time frame. Now, specific to positional aspects, now again, this is going to kind of depend on like tactics of the team and whatnot, but generally speaking, central players, central defenders, and central midfielders generally have the ball at their feet a little bit longer in a match, maybe closer to that 120, like 2-minute mark kind of thing. And they generally hold the ball a little bit longer with their possession. And attacking players and some of the wing players, generally they have a little bit less time on the ball. So they have a little bit less time on the ball. And that kind of just creates a little bit more of a specificity to the position when we're going through some of the drills. But the important thing about that 90 seconds also to consider, so there's a couple things to take out of that statistic and that idea, is that the majority of the time, it's off the ball movement is what you as a player are going to be doing. So the majority of the time in a game, you are moving on the field without the ball and trying to find space. Now, off the ball movement is an extremely important aspect of the game, but it's very hard to develop in a solo environment. It takes a little bit more of cueing and other players to kind of like factor in things. Now, there are aspects of the off the ball movement that you can play in. There's going to be some other topics discussed with these national videos that would also tie in with that. So obviously speed training would be a factor of that. The faster you can get to the space that you need to get to, the better it's going to be. Agility is another aspect of that, which there's also a soccer agility video. So those are all references of movement, but there's a little bit more to movement than just the speed and the agility and getting to that position. It's understanding the game, reading the positions and knowing the space that you want to get to, whether you want to run at or away from a defender, whether you want to be moving forward, back. So that off the ball movement is very important, but again, it's something that's a little bit more challenging to do in a solo environment, vice just the speed and agility aspect. So those are good to train for. And then the off the ball movement is something that you can more kind of work on once you're into a group team environment. So the other aspect of that 90-second idea that is important to think about is that you're going to have very limited time with the ball at your feet, and that makes that time extremely important. So you're only going to, as a player, get a very small handful of touches of the ball in a game, and you're only going to get a small handful of opportunities to pass or shoot. As an attacking player, you'll be very lucky to get 5 to 10 shots on target in a game, if you get them on target. As a midfield player, you're looking at maybe 20 to 50 passes in a full match. So, with those things in mind, it's important that you have those skills honed in, because if you have all those limited opportunities in that match, every one is very vital and important. And if you waste some of those opportunities, with a sloppy first touch, a sloppy dribble, shots that aren't going on target, passes that aren't accurate, you're going to be taking away from that 90 seconds, and you're going to be wasting those opportunities that are very few for yourself as a player in a game. And the other thing to consider with that is, because of the fact that that time frame is so limited, it is important to train some of these skills in an outside environment where you're able to take more time to really focus on it. So again, if you're only getting a handful of touches in a match and only getting the ball at your feet a handful of times to dribble, practicing your first touch and passing, you're not really going to be developing those skills. There's not enough time with the ball to really develop that skill. So if all you are doing is just game time scenario and scrimmaging, again, you're just not accumulating enough time to really get a good feel and to get a really good practice of some of those skills that we're looking to develop for the game. So that's why we're going to go through some of this solo stuff, and that gives you the rationale behind why it is important to sometimes take some of these skills outside of the game, really focus on them, because you get a little bit more, or a lot more repetition opportunity, a little bit more patterning, and you can really kind of hone in on those skills. And also taking out the game time scenario kind of takes away some of that pressure, some of those extra elements, and it allows you to take that time to really kind of focus on your techniques and to focus on the really key things that you want to be looking at. Sometimes those are very hard to kind of internalize and have that cognitive aspect in a game time scenario when there's a lot more going on. So again, that kind of just gives you that rationale of the fact that in a game time scenario, you don't get the ball that much. So let's take that time outside of the game and let's practice. So just a couple things here. These are going to be the main things we're going to work on with some of the drills today, and these are the things that are kind of important. So again, outside of off the ball movement, one of the things we're going to look at today with some of the drills is touch. So touch is kind of a subjective skill quality, but more or less what it is just a feel of the ball. So it's the feel of controlling, receiving, knowing how the ball feels at your feet, having the ability to keep it close, and really having that feel of the ball at your feet and knowing what you want to do with it. So it's kind of a tricky one to articulate, but it's, once you have played, you kind of have that idea of like what touch is. And so touch is just that ability to feel what you want to do. Dribbling is a little bit more straightforward, but there's a couple kind of different aspects to dribbling. So there's obviously just straight dribbling, which is just linear, which doesn't really happen that often, but it is something that does happen and is a good thing to practice. And then there's also a little bit more tighter dribbling where you're kind of moving laterally in different directions. So dribbling is the ball at your feet, but in a movement pattern, trying to either move forward, backward, side to side. So movement with the ball. Now, primarily, what we're going to be looking at with touch and dribbling is going to be with cone drills. So we're going to show you some different cone drills that you can do to kind of develop some of those qualities of the dribbling. And when you are dribbling, you are also developing your touch to figure out kind of that feel of the ball. Two other skill development aspects that we can look at with some of these drills with the solo soccer skill development: passing and shooting. So passing and shooting, we're going to be using more wall or target drills, less cone stuff. So we'll go over that later, but for most of the passing and shooting drills, you just need a wall aspect. And so some of the key things in terms of like passing, shooting, the emphasis again is going to be kind of like positionally directed to a certain degree. So attacking players generally maybe want to place a little bit more focus on that shooting aspect. Still obviously want to practice passing as well, but shooting does have a higher importance in that positional area. Vice central defenders or midfielders who are more involved in the passing aspect of the game. Now again, this kind of depends on game tactics and how your team's set up, but in a general area, attacking players a little bit more focused on shooting, and midfield and defenders a little bit more of a emphasis on passing. So some of the individual kind of more specific elements of each one of these we're going to kind of go into as we go through the drills, but that kind of gives you an idea of what we're going to go through as we take you through these solo soccer skill development drills. So for our first solo drill here, this is a real simple one. This is one that you can definitely do on your own solo. You really don't need anything. All you need is a ball. What we're going to be working on is just a little bit of, it's got different names: keep ups, juggling, however you want to describe it. Basically, it's just you in space, kicking the ball, trying to keep it up in the air. So juggling seems like a really simple drill, but it's a very useful tool to, again, get that feel. You know, if you've taken some time away and you haven't really touched the ball, as I have not, it gives you a really good feel for the ball and just kind of like how it's going to react, and it gives you that little bit of a feel for the touch and your control. So again, really simple, just space, ball, and from there, we're just going to practice juggling. So hopefully this works out okay. So, obviously something I would need to work on, but the juggling aspect is basically what you want to do is you want to keep it as close to you as you can, as controlled as you can. You want to find that touch and feel so that the ball stays in that same area as much as possible. And then there's progressions to the juggling aspect. So you can kind of just freestyle it for a little while, get that feel for it. Once you have that proficiency, you know, juggling is a counting drill, so you want to count up 20, 50, 100. When you get that control, you're able to do 100. Then you might want to change some of the elements of that juggle. So changing those elements would be putting provisions on. So essentially, maybe you only use the right foot, so right foot only juggling, and then you go to your non-dominant foot and you would do left foot only juggling. Some other things, you could do instep juggling, you can do outside, inside juggling. So there's a lot of different ways that you can juggle the ball that would kind of give you different feels and different touches, but again, just working on that control and touch with just that nice simple drill. And again, just working on counts, working on specific provisions as you go, and just progressing up through those different qualities. So this is like a nice, easy kind of warm-up drill that you can do before moving into some of the other things. Just kind of warm your feet up and get a little feel. Okay, for our next drill here, we're gonna work on a basic cone weave. So the cone weave is, again, a dribbling touch drill. You set the cones up really close together for this drill. Rationale behind this is you want to have really small, light touches and get a feel for that light touch as you go through, as well as just so that it's not super taxing drill. We're going to get into some of that later on with some more cardiovascular stuff. So this one's just a touch dribbling drill. You just weave in and out of the cones. So I'm just going to start off with just like a simple single foot, right-footed, weave in and out, and then we'll talk about some of the progressions. So, as you can see, it's a challenging drill. Those light touches are very hard to kind of keep in your feet. So, ball got away a couple times there. Ideally, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to keep that ball as close to the cones as you possibly can, keep those touches as light as you can, and keep that weave as close as possible. So, that was a bit of like a freestyle. And again, as you progress, some of the progressions would be creating provisions. So you would alternate back and forth between your right foot and your left foot, using only certain aspects of your foot. So possibly doing outside only, inside only, alternating back and forth between inside, outside. And again, just a lot of different provisions that you can kind of work through to make the drill more challenging and to work kind of different aspects of that dribbling capacity. The last extra progression, which I would not have displayed very well with that drill, that you'd want to look at and you want to progress to and kind of work towards, is keeping your head up. So when you are dribbling, the better you are at keeping your head up and looking and scanning forward rather than having to look at the ball and your feet to kind of keep that control, the better that is in terms of game time scenario and applying that dribbling ability in a game scenario. So head up is kind of that next aspect once you start getting a little bit more proficiency with that cone weave drill. Okay, so for our next drill, kind of an expansion on the cone weave. This one's a little bit more simple to set up. So it's just a 2-cone slalom. So the cones can be a little bit farther apart, maybe like 3 meters-ish kind of thing. Just a little bit distance apart so you can kind of break out into a little bit of a longer dribble. And basically this one is just kind of figure eighting through the cones back and forth. Again, more of kind of like a warm-up drill to get into some later things, kind of get a feel for that touch. And again, this is just a nice kind of easy dribbling drill to run through. So just a quick demo on this one. So again, real simple, figure 8. And again, that was kind of just like a freestyle version. To progress, creating those specific provisions that you want to focus on. So for instance, if you wanted to focus on right foot only, focus on left foot only, focus on using the out foot of the foot only. So again, just kind of following those progressions to kind of create specific conditions that you have to follow while you're doing the drill. And then the other aspect, again, as we talked about before, starting off, looking at the ball to get a feel, and then slowly progressing into that more head up position so that it would apply in a much better game time scenario looking at the actual game. Okay, for the next drill, again, just another progression. So we started with our cone weave with small touches, moving on to the slalom, a little bit more directional, a little bit longer touches. And then we're gonna move on to kind of like that last weaving cone drill that we'll kind of discuss here. Just a T drill. So you've got the 3 cones on the far end with the 1 cone here, forming a T formation that you're gonna weave through. So again, this is just an expansion because you have some varying distances. You have some long, some short, different turns, some 180, some 90. So kind of get some different aspects here as you go through. The cones are cut down a little bit just to kind of fit in the frame. You can change the distance on this all depending on how much you want to go. So you can make a bigger T if you want to get a little bit more running speed to it, shorter T if you want to work a little bit more on that tight dribbling. So just a quick demo on this one here. And that's our T drill. So again, same considerations as the cone weave and as the slalom. You want to make sure those turns are as tight as possible. That's your key marker there in terms of like that dribbling proficiency, is to hug those cones as close as you can. And again, following along with some of those progressions, same thing as before, creating specific conditions. So right foot only, left foot only, using a certain part of the feet, instep, outstep, to develop some of those specific dribbling capacities to apply. And again, as we said before, that big progression, starting off, watching the feet a little bit might be necessary, but working your way up to that head up position so you can transfer those skills into a more game time scenario. Okay, so for our next drill, we're gonna move on to a little bit of a different kind of dribbling scenario. So now we're gonna work on that straight on dribbling. So something that might kind of appear in the game, just a full-on sprint with the ball in a straight pattern. So again, depending on position, this might be more applicable. If you're more of an out-and-out winger that kind of rides the line, this can be really helpful. Just kind of have that capacity. So what you see here is just a straight on gate dribbling drill. So we have the gates roughly 2 meters apart. So the reason for having the gates when you're doing a straight on speed kind of dribbling drill is just kind of keep yourself honest and keep yourself in a straightish line, and it kind of can make sure that you have a little bit more control. If you don't have the gate, you might end up going way offline, and that really doesn't serve the purpose of this drill. So staying inside the gates so you have an idea there. And with this one, you start at your pace, you work up, and you're just trying to focus on just your touches as well as a little bit of speed as you go through. So quick demo here, and then we'll talk it through. So that was a really quick demonstration. We're only sitting at about 20-ish meters here. So if you're in an outsider scenario, you can expand that quite a bit out to like a 40, even 100 meter marker to give yourself more touches as you go through. And the other benefit to that is it becomes a little bit more of a conditioning drill. So with that, don't let too much fatigue accumulate. Take a little bit of rest if you need to make sure that the skills are able to stay at a high quality. So a couple things to talk through on this one. The key thing with that straightaway dribbling is you want to find your pacing so that the dribble kind of follows really naturally in your running stride. There are scenarios in a game where it can be helpful to get the ball out of your feet, knock it into space, especially if you have some pace or some speed and trying to get past someone. But generally, that's only going to be in that back half or once you have some space and clearance. A lot of times when you're dribbling, you want to make sure the ball, even if you're going fast, is still really close to your body so you can adjust and dribble your way out of trouble. If the ball gets too far away, it's very easy from an attacking perspective for a defender to come in and swipe that ball away if it's too far away. But if it's close in your feet, it makes it a lot harder for them to get in a challenge. So what you want to try and do and work your way towards with this one is progression is faster speed and less strides in between each dribble. Possibly even getting to the point where you have a very controlled, every second stride on your foot that you're dribbling with would be a contact with the ball. So that's kind of like your progression there. The other way to progress this one in a really easy way and to make it a little bit more challenging would be to shrink your gates, right? So just kind of close up that gate, make it a little bit tighter, narrower, gradually work your way in a little bit closer, and that's going to create a lot more challenge, especially when you are adding in the speed to keep yourself in that straight line. But that's going to be extremely helpful applying this, especially depending on your position. If you're an out-and-out wing or right back, riding that line with some hard sprints, it's going to help you to stay in that straight pattern so you can keep that ball close, fast, and in the right direction. And again, same as before with a dribbling progression here, head up the whole time is going to help you to transfer that into a game time scenario a lot better. So that's your other progression as you start getting more comfortable. Okay, so our next dribbling drill that we're going to work through here, very similar to the straight dribble piece, but just kind of changing the direction a little bit. So we're still working on some gates here. The gates are closed in a little bit. You might have to take your pace down a little bit, but you're just going to weave through your gates with your dribbling. So this is kind of working some of those fine skills, but also trying to figure out your pace. And this is a good one to kind of moderate your pace in terms of getting a little bit of the ball away and bringing it back in. So quick demo on this one here. So again, similar to that straight on dribble, but now we just added in some direction to that. So a little bit more applicable to a game scenario, moving between players. So again, key thing on this one, progressions would be providing specific conditions. So again, using a certain foot or position on the foot, inside, outside, as well as progression would be shrinking the gates to make that dribbling more exact. And the other good thing with this one would be to time it. So that would give you an idea of if you are improving that pace between as well as that dribbling ability. So a couple different ways to progress this one. And again, that one key progression we talked about before, as you work through your way through, get a little bit more comfortable, trying to focus more on that head up position. So in a game time scenario, you're able to scan the field and see the play. Okay, so we're moving on from some of the cone drills, and we're gonna start working on some wall drills. So with this one here, you just need a solid wall. So brick, concrete, whatever it is. Now, one thing to note, if you are gonna be using something brick or really hard, you might wanna use something that you're not super attached to in terms of a ball. It's gonna get torn up pretty bad on the concrete or the brick, so just keep that in mind. So the wall drills we're going to be doing, primarily focusing on passing drills, but what you do get with the feedback from the wall as the ball bounces back is you are getting some touch feedback as well. So you have to focus on control and touch as you're going through. So with control, big thing is you want to feather that as much as possible, right? So imagine that the ball is something breakable or soft, that you don't want to have hard impact on it. You want to feather it and cushion it into the foot before you transfer that back. So first one here, we're just going to do a quick demo on, is just a simple two touch. So we're going to hit, touch to control, and then a second touch to pass back to the wall. So that's a quick, just real easy passing drill. Mainly just kind of get a feel for your passing. So a couple things with the passing, real simple stuff. Just make sure your plant foot is in a good position. So you want to try and get as close to beside the ball as you can. And then passing should generally be done as an instep on the inside portion of the foot as much as possible. And it gives you a little bit more control on that. So as you can see there, that was right foot only. I'm not going to show my left foot because it's terrible, but that would be a progression. Would be to move to your opposite non-dominant leg, do some passing from that side as well. And there's lots of different kind of progressions. So you can do right leg only, left leg only, alternating back and forth between right and left, control which foot you do control with. So lots of different ways to progress through this wall drill as you go through. Changing your distance will also be a good progression as well. So going farther from the wall to require a little bit more power in, and then also that power in is going to require a little bit more control to get that first touch under control. Okay, another wall touching drill. So this one, instead of a two touch, you're just going to progress it down and you're just going to go as a one touch drill. So one touch drill just basically means every time the ball makes contact, comes back to you, you're going to rebound it and kick right back on the one touch. So this one takes a little bit more control because you're controlling the ball with the pass. So that adds quite an extra element of difficulty to that one. So again, you want to be a little bit closer on this one as well, so you're able to get that control. So you see there was a couple fumbles there, but generally you want it to be the one touch in, one touch out. Again, same progression protocols as you get with the two touch wall drill. You add in the aspect of using your non-dominant foot. You can do alternating back and forth between the left and right, right only, left only. You're not going to be changing that foot position, practicing the fundamentals of using that instep foot as your passing piece. But again, just those progressions. And again, the progression for this one, generally you want to be closer to the wall than a two-touch drill, but with this one, you can work your way a little bit farther away from the wall, which is going to require a little bit more of a hard kick to get to the wall, and then a little bit more rebound and control on the way back. So the key thing with this one is to try and keep the ball low, try and keep that bouncing to a minimum. Just a little bit of tip on that is to kind of pass down as you make contact. If you kind of pass up, the ball will ride up and kind of chip up. So you're trying to chip down to keep the ball close to the ground. So that's our one-touch wall drill. Okay, so for our next wall drill we're going to work on here, kind of similar to the two-touch, but a little bit different. We're just going to go with some hard contact wall control. So the nice thing about using a wall is you get kind of a weird feedback off the wall, kind of bounce off in all sorts of different directions depending on the wall surface that you're using. So but with this one we're going to be using here, the goal is on your first hit and each hit towards the wall, you want to put a lot of contact into it, so kicking it really, really hard to get a lot of bounce back. The key aspect of this drill is your control from the rebound from the wall. So you're trying to keep that ball nice and close on the return. So you're trying to work on that control and that touchability, keeping that ball nice and close, which transfers over to game time scenarios of receiving a pass and trying to keep it within your area. So Quick demo on this one. So again, with this one, actually the progression is to get closer to the wall rather than farther away. The closer to the wall, the more contact you're getting back. So the closer you move to the wall, the more feedback you're gonna get, the harder it's gonna be able to control that ball. So again, as that ball comes back, feather it, control. Key thing with this one too is you wanna try and focus on keeping your body as close or as in front of the ball as you can. So you want to shift your feet. Sometimes you get lazy, stretch the leg. The issue with that is the ball does bounce in a weird way. It's going to hop away. So you want to try and keep your body in front of the ball for that receiving portion. Okay, so we're gonna run through our last wall drill. So this is just a variation or progression of the last one. So again, a hard shot and kind of like vary the intensity of the shot based on your ability in terms of the control. But we're gonna try this one as a hard shot with a turn. So this is kind of the practice receiving, controlling, and turning as one motion. This is a really important game time piece of being able to find yourself some space and move with the ball. So hard contact against the wall, control, but then also with the control, a little bit of a turn in a direction. So quick demo on this one. So there's a lot of different variants on this one, a lot of different ways you can do this. In terms of the direction you're gonna go. So your turn can be a lot of different ways. You can do a full 90, 180. Really the key thing here is just to practice that control and the feel of how the ball feels coming into the foot, controlling and moving in a direction. A way to make this one even more challenging in a progression would be to have, similar to some of the other drills with the cones, would be to have a gate that you have to shoot through on that first touch. So if it comes off the wall, you have to turn, touch, and get the ball through the gate in that direction. So that's going to provide more progression in terms of that accuracy of that first touch control and moving in a direction. So again, hard off the wall, control, and focus on your turn, whichever way you're going. Okay, we're gonna move on from our wall drills. We're gonna move towards some shooting drills. Now, a couple things to consider with shooting drills. Generally speaking, it's good to have a hard target when you're doing shooting drills, like a net or something like that, so it gives you a little bit better feedback. But that's not to say that you can't practice some of your mechanics against a wall. And then if you want, you can draw a target on the wall so you have an idea of that hard target and where you're shooting for. So a couple things to talk through on the shooting. Key thing again with shooting like passing is your plant foot position. So you want to make sure you get a good plant of the foot right beside the ball. You don't want it to be forward or back. You want it to be right beside for that good position. Shooting, instead of on the instep of the foot on the inside, you want to try and put that on the top of the foot of the lace to get a little bit more power out of the shot. And a good thing to practice with the shooting in general, trying to keep the shots low, hard, and placed. So in terms of the game scenario, a low, hard shot that is placed really well to a corner is a lot harder for a keeper to save. They have to get down and across at the same time, so it's much harder movement. And generally speaking, a placed shot that is in a good position is going to be a little bit better in terms of scoring than a shot that has a lot of power but is not placed as well. So that placed accuracy is a good thing to practice. So again, in this solo scenario, you can get lots of reps in on shooting and really practice your mechanics, get a really good feel for it. So our first shooting drill here we're gonna run through is a very simple line them up, have a shot. So this one is just a very good one to kind of just work on your mechanics on the start with the ball in a stationary position. Another consideration with shooting positions is you want to try and stay with your body forward, and namely you want it so that when you make contact with the ball, your knee is over top of the ball. So that's your big thing that you want to focus on, is when you make that contact, that your knee is over top of the ball. It's going to keep that strike a little bit lower. The big thing you want to avoid with shooting in general is leaning back. So if you're leaning back with the shot will generally travel up and away. So that gives you an idea there for that one. So that's a quick, easy shooting drill. You don't even have to have multiple balls. Even if you have one, shoot, replace. Taking it from that place position just kind of helps you to really kind of hone in on your mechanics and get a really good feel for just the way that you want to shoot and how it's going to feel, and then you can work on some progressions. For the next skill development drill here, which the shooting premise, we're going to move on to a little bit of a progression. So we started off with that stationary shooting drill, and that's a good starting point and a good way to work on your mechanics, but it's not really that applicable in terms of a game time scenario. In a game time scenario, the ball is usually moving when you're shooting. There's very few opportunities where it's actually from a dead stop position. So you're better off to practice your shooting mechanics and get a little bit more reps in with some sort of motion on the ball when the ball is in a moving position. So we're just going to demo one here where it's a very easy in, quick little cut, and then a shot from that position. But again, the same mechanics all apply. Good foot plant, laced shot, and making sure you have some of that forward body position with that knee over the ball to keep that shot low and accurate. So that gives you a quick idea there. So just that little bit of that shift, and the ball is now in motion, so you have to kind of adapt. And that's a very kind of common motion with that shooting motion, is that little cut to get into a more open position away from a defender, and then have your strike in that position there. So that's a real easy one. A very simple progression on any shooting drill for most people is going to be to switch to your non-dominant leg. Shooting is definitely an aspect where the majority of people have a very dominant side. Practicing that non-dominant side can be extremely important and a monumental factor in making you a much better player to be able to shoot on both sides proficiently. Transfers over extremely well into game time scenarios, makes you very unpredictable in terms of which way you're going to shoot from. So with this drill and with the previous stationary drill, alternating between left and right foot with your shooting practices is going to pay huge dividends in terms of your overall skill development. But again, this is just a quick forward shifting drill to practice some shooting with movement. Our next drill here with our shooting focus. So this one is just a slight progression on top of the previous movement drill. And this is a very specific drill that would be good to work on for attacking players. A lot of times attacking players, you're going to be back to goal and having to turn from that position and trying to have a shot. So this one works a lot better if you do have that hard target, because the challenge of this drill is from that back position, turning, reacting, and seeing where you are positionally in terms of the net, and then being able to adjust your shot based on that position. So if you do have a net or some sort of hard target, that works really well for this drill. We're just going to demo it with the wall here. But again, using that target just adds that extra element of that cognition that makes this drill a little bit more challenging. So again, you're going to start back to goal, a touch, and again, the touch can vary depending on how much you want to touch and how much distance you want to create. So again, this is just a really quick drill, kind of specific to attacking players, a real out-and-out striker that does spend a lot of that time receiving the ball back to goal and having to do that quick touch, and then from that touch. And the touch can be however you want, again, so you can touch left, right, and again, practicing dominant and non-dominant foot to get that proficiency from both sides. Especially with this drill, can be very beneficial in an in-game scenario that as a defender, they wouldn't know whether you're going to turn left or right. if you do have the proficiency with both sides. So it gives you a little bit of advantage there if you do develop that proficiency with both legs. But again, this is kind of the same as that movement drill, but just a little bit of a different movement back to goal, turning and shooting from that position there. So this is just a good practice piece for an attacking player. Okay, so just a little outro here on our soccer skill development video. So again, as you went through there, we had all those drills you can work through. Again, mostly solo stuff, or pretty much primarily solo stuff. With the scenario of the pandemic, you're going to be probably doing a lot of this stuff on your own. Now, if you do end up in a situation where you do have some partner or team exercises, it's great. A lot of this stuff can kind of be applied in some of those scenarios as well. But again, that 90 seconds, just remember that you don't have a lot of time on the ball in a match. So taking this time to work on your touch, your dribbling, your passing, your shooting, getting that repetition in, getting those skills down in this controlled situation where you're able to get those reps in and make them perfect, is going to pay a lot of dividends to those short amount of times that you have that ball possession in a game. And again, that off the ball movement, all that time that you spend without the ball is another thing to think about. So again, your speed, agility, as well as endurance. You want to be able to last that whole match as you go through. Those are three components of the off the ball movement. But then you also have the off the ball movement of the actual game time scenario pieces of knowing the game and finding your space. So that's something that, again, is trained a lot better in a group scenario and in team scenario. So take this time when you have the time to focus on some of those very specific skill development drills that we went through today. And when we get back to getting into some games, you're going to be able to see how those kind of pan through and see how much development you have been able to accomplish and make the most of those 90 seconds in that match.
PSP Kingston, the health and wellness provider for the military community.